You open your eyes because your body decided it was time. No alarm, no notification, no place you're already late for. You lie there for a second and ask yourself the only question that matters. What do I feel like doing today? For most of us, that question is a fantasy, but for roughly 300,000 years, it was just Tuesday. It was every single day for every single human who ever lived until very, very recently. Here's a number that should stop you. The average person alive today will spend around 90,000 hours of their life working. That's a third of your waking life handed over to a job. And yet, for over 95% of the time humans have existed on this planet, jobs did not exist. No wages, no manager, no resume. So what were people actually doing with their days? We don't have to guess blindly because we have evidence, and it comes from two places: living communities who still practice a foraging lifestyle, and the bones and artifacts left behind by the ones who came before them. In the 1960s, anthropologists began seriously studying groups like the San people of the Kalahari. What they found broke the old assumption that early humans lived in constant, exhausting struggle. On average, adults spent somewhere between 15 and 20 hours a week finding food. 15 to 20, not 50, not 60. And this wasn't a one-off. Researchers found nearly identical numbers among the Hadza of Tanzania, forest communities in the Congo Basin, and desert-dwelling groups in Australia. Completely different climates, completely different diets, and yet the same basic rhythm of life. So if survival only took up a fraction of the week, what filled the rest of it? The skeletons themselves tell part of the story. When you compare the bones of hunter-gatherers to the bones of the first farmers who came after them, the farmers consistently look worse off. Shorter, more cavities, more joint damage from repetitive labor, more signs of periods of hunger. The people who came before agriculture were physically in better shape. That alone rewrites a lot of what we assume about primitive life. But the most striking clues aren't about survival at all. They're about beauty. Deep inside painted caves in France, some of the artwork is over 30,000 years old. Herds of horses and lions rendered with shading, depth, even a sense of motion, painted by torchlight in total darkness, far from the cave entrance. Nobody stumbles into that kind of skill. Someone practiced. Someone had the time to practice. In coastal caves in South Africa, archaeologists have pulled out tiny shell beads, deliberately drilled and strung, dated to nearly 100,000 years old. Jewelry, essentially, made by people who had to walk miles just to reach the coast, and then spend hours with stone tools carving a hole barely a millimeter wide. Not for food, not for warmth, just to wear something beautiful around their neck. And in a cave in Germany, researchers found a flute carved from a bird bone, with finger holes spaced precisely enough to play a scale. Whoever made it understood music as a concept. They had the free time and the motivation to build an instrument instead of another spear. This is what people did with the hours they weren't spending on survival. They made things. They made things beautiful. So picture an actual day. You wake with the light. The fire from last night gets built back up. Breakfast is whatever's left. Dried meat, some nuts, maybe fruit gathered the day before. And it's eaten together with conversation, because eating alone wasn't really a thing yet. Some mornings, a few people head out to hunt or gather. Other mornings, nobody does, because there's already enough stored. On those days, people fix tools, work animal hide into something usable, or just sit and talk. There's no supervisor checking whether you're productive. Skill earns respect on its own. That's incentive enough. When a hunt does happen, it's rarely the dramatic chase you picture. Early humans were endurance hunters, tracking an animal at a steady pace, for hours if needed, until the animal simply overheats and can't go on. Humans are almost uniquely built for this because we sweat instead of pant. By early afternoon, whatever work needed doing is usually done. And then nothing in the most important sense of the word. People rest. They sit in the shade. They groom each other. They braid hair, carve small designs into bone, doze off in the heat. Researchers studying groups like the hoansi found that adults spend roughly 6 hours a day just being social, not working, not sleeping, simply talking, laughing, maintaining relationships. In a world with no money and no police, your relationships are your safety net, so people invested in them heavily, on purpose. Then the sun goes down and something shifts. Anthropologists who recorded hundreds of hours of campfire conversation noticed a pattern. Daytime talk is practical, where the animals were, which plants are ripe, but after dark, the vast majority of conversation turns into something else entirely. Stories, myths about how the world began, tales of ancestors doing impossible things, jokes. This, many researchers argue, is where human culture, religion, mythology, imagination itself was actually born, in the safety of firelight after the stomach is full. Even sleep looked different. Before artificial light existed, humans typically slept in 2 blocks, a first sleep of a few hours, then a quiet, wakeful stretch in the dark, then a second sleep until dawn. That waking up at 2 a.m. you call insomnia used to just be part of the night. Then, around 10,000 years ago, something changed everything. Humans started planting seeds instead of following them, and agriculture turned out to be a trap with no exit. More food supported more people. More people needed more food, and there was no going back to a smaller population living lightly off the land. Farming meant more hours, harder labor, worse diets, and, the bones confirm it, shorter lives. But it also meant surplus, and surplus meant specialists, and specialists eventually meant jobs. By the time cities existed, the old rhythm, a few hours of effort, long stretches of rest, evenings full of stories, was gone, replaced by schedules built by other people. Today, you'll spend most of your waking life working towards things your ancestors never had to chase: status, achievement, a retirement where you'll finally get to rest. They didn't need to retire into that life. They were already living it every single morning with nothing to prove and no one keeping score.